Hi everybody, it's Russ. Welcome to the latest edition of My Hammers 11. Now you'll notice there's no video feed today. There's a reason for that, and we'll get to that when I introduce my guest. He's probably best thing to describe him is probably West Ham folklore, Twitter legend maybe. He co-owns the West Ham Way pre-match events, which are always really well attended. Unfortunately, I'm too busy in the ground already. I'd love to attend. And also the West Ham Way podcast. It's ExWHU employee. How are you doing, X?
I'm very well. Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. As I said, we're doing this, interviewing loads of people, finding out about their Hammers 11s. What we try and do is get a bit of a grasp of your sort of experiences and your memories. So we asked a couple of questions. The first thing is, what was your earliest West Ham memory?
Well, my earliest West Ham memory was that my dad used to go off to the games. So when I was, I must have been very, very young. I'm talking like 5, 6, and he'd go off to the games and he'd be gone for like however long it used to take, 3, 4 hours, say. He'd be gone. And the whole time he was there, obviously I had no experience of football really. So I used to kind of imagine what it was like and what he got up to and so on. And he'd come home and he'd either be in a really happy mood or really bad mood, or more often than not bad mood with it being West Ham. Yeah. So and then I would always, and it kind of built up this kind of magical thing in my head about what going to football was. So that was my kind of first memory of knowing about the concept of football, so to speak. And I said to my dad, I want to come with you. Now my dad must have had a really good social life at the games in terms of the drinking factor, because he was always like, oh no, you can't go, your mum won't let you, and there was always an excuse. So I decided, I've not actually told many people this, but I decided to test the water, so to speak. So I claimed for a year that I was going to support Arsenal, just because a lot of my friends at school did, and I thought, right, well, if you won't let me go to West Ham, this will teach you. So I kind of claimed to support Arsenal, and it was actually the year that Arsenal won the league in the last minute at Anfield. So it was quite a significant time to almost be a fake Arsenal fan. So anyway, when they won the league, I didn't really know much, but I knew they'd won the league. So I just showed off about it to my dad, and he was like, right, I'm not having this. So next season, he bought me my first season ticket and a complete home strip. So from that point onwards, I was obviously a proper West Ham fan.
So
and my first ever game was a 1-1 draw in the start. It must have been the start of the 1990-1991 season, and it was against Portsmouth. Guy Whittingham scored first for them, and then McAvenny scored for us, and that was my first game, and it was love ever since. I love being a love that's been tested many times, but a love ever since.
And it's nice that I see. So I don't know if you've ever heard a description where someone's blackmailed their dad into becoming a West Ham fan, but I love it. I absolutely love it.
I wish I'd stuck. In some ways, I wish I'd stuck with Arsenal.
In hindsight's a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. So that's your earliest. What's if imagine from the 90s onwards, there's a lot of stuff that's happened at West Ham. What would be your greatest West Ham sort of memory? It doesn't have to be a game. It could be just meeting your dream, your main player, the one you loved, or just to be interesting to know that.
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, since we've been doing the events and the podcast, that's enabled me to live like a life in terms of West Ham that I never thought I'd ever be able to. Our first ever interview was with Trevor Brookins. It doesn't come much bigger than that. Then we had him for our 100th show, and then we've been able to do. I've been lucky enough to meet pretty much every West Ham person I've ever wanted to, bar Di Canio. We haven't interviewed Di Canio yet, so that's an objective, hopefully, to complete soon. But another memory I have in terms of actual matches was my first ever away game. Well, I say away game because it was at a neutral venue. But it was very, very significant. Was the FA Cup semi-final when we lost 4-0 to Notts Forest, and Tony Gale got sent off. And I was a young lad then, 8, 9, I must have been. And whilst I was gutted West Ham were obviously losing and not going to make the FA Cup final, I was just totally gripped by the fact that despite the result and the inevitable loss, the fans were just so amazing. And from that point onwards, that Billy Bonds Claret and Blue Army chant that lasted for what seemed like the whole game, I was hooked. And I think even still to this day, it was my first ever away game. It's still probably my favourite. And when you tell someone that you lost 4-0 in that game, it's a rather bizarre story. But if you were there, you would know why.
Understand,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's weird thinking your favourite game was a 4-0 defeat in the
Yes,
semi-final.
exactly.
But no, no, I get it, totally get it. And it's interesting. You see, one was talking about their favourite game, and it was like a 1-1. It was a 2-1 win against Norwich City in like 7. And it's like, it makes no sense in the grand scheme of things, but for them it had that sort of extra significance because they were, came out from 1-0 down, and they were conga lining down Green Street and stuff. And those memories just brings back. Brilliant. Okay, well, what we'll do, let's crack on. We'll, as I said, we go through and we ask everyone their Hammers 11. It's a 4-4-2, no fancy diamond formations or anything, or wing backs. Simple 4-4-2. I can be a bit lenient on where people go, and as long as you don't put Paolo in goal or something, I'm okay. And
he wouldn't let me.
And then secondly, he would, but not on away games.
Yes. Yeah.
Secondly, you'd have you have to see them alive to play. So as we said before, Bobby wouldn't be in our team, but in my team, but I don't know. Andy Melville might be, or maybe not, but or Roger Johnson or someone like that. And it can be anything. So it can be just your favourite players, your best players, your worst players, whatever. So let's start X. Let's start with between the sticks. Who will be in the X11?
Right. Well, for me, obviously, as I've established, I started going in 1990. Yep. So it's players that I've seen from then onwards. So as we've already said, we rule out the likes of Brooklyn, Moore, people like that. So for me, in that time, it was the first goalkeeper I can remember playing for West Ham, and also my favourite, who I've had the privilege, as I said, to have met a couple of times at events now. Absolute gentleman. He came from near Moscow, and it has to be Ludo, I think, for me. We've had great keepers since then. I think, actually, if you look since I've been going, you could argue that goalkeeper has arguably been one of our strongest positions in the last kind of 20, 30 years, because you could throw in Robert Green, you could throw in David James, Shaka Hislop, Fabianski. There's been a number of good goalkeepers over those years, but Ludo was just immense for me. I remember that Man United game that obviously stands out when we stopped them, winning the league, and then just he was just such a presence in goal. And I remember, I think he won Hammer of the Year in my first ever season going as well. And I remember we were, at school, when you admit to being a West Ham fan, everyone's like, because they're all Arsenal, Tottenham, Liverpool, Man United. So you got a lot of stick. But when I used to maintain that despite being the equivalent of the Championship, we had the best goalkeeper, and I remember Manchester United were linked with signing him possibly before they got Schmeichel, and I said, "There's the proof. There's the proof how good he was," and he was just brilliant, and he's such a gentleman as well. As I said, I've met him a couple of times, as I'm sure you have, and he's a diamond bloke. So it's based upon ability, but also he'd be a great guy to have around the dressing room as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, good old Ludo. I don't know if you're watching Robert Banks, and I say in every interview I talk about that. Robert Banks is he sort of digitalized all the end of season reviews, and he's put them on YouTube. So I think it goes back from about mid-80s up until I think it's just on 2013-14 season, and you go back and rewatch. It's like the Netflix of West Ham fans, really. You've done the Tiger King and people like that. It's all about it. It's
wacky as Tiger King as well, isn't it?
Some of them. So that mid-90s period, definitely, that's for sure. And that was probably as I was saying to someone else, I think saying to Baz Cox, that sort of 90s period was probably the last time that footballers were fun. Do you know what I mean? Like, where they had that John Moncur would paint their hair and, turn up naked. And, and I remember Neil Ruddock doing the laps of the pitches and being almost bollock naked by the end of it, throwing his T-shirt and stuff. You don't get that. It's so professional now. You don't get those sort of characters. But, all right, we'll put Ludo between the sticks. Who we got at left back then, X?
Again, it gets harder as the positions go on, but for me, there's only one real contender for left back, and I'm sure he'd be in most people of my ages 11, and that's the penalty king, the hard man, Julian Dix.
Yeah, exactly.
He was just such again a player that I was so proud of playing for West Ham in those days. He was hard, which was quite cool. He scored loads of penalties. Really wore the shirt with pride. Stood up to the likes of Vinnie Jones and Cantona and people like that. And just a brilliant person. Again, had the privilege to interview and do events with him. And it's funny because Dave and I spoke about him on a recent podcast. At first, you're not quite sure how to take him. He's quite standoffish. He's quite quiet and mild-mannered, believe it or not, from his the image on the football pitch.
Yeah.
And at first, you're not really sure what to take to him. But once you get to know him, you realise that he is such a lovely fella, and he has so much time to support charities, come on podcasts, help people out. That again, and he's very popular with ex-players. So I think already I've got two very good players, but two very good people for the dressing room as well.
Definitely. No, Dixie was an astounding, and as you said, he's one of those guys that people speak very highly of, ex-players and stuff, and that's a testimony to the player out in the dressing room, and it, rather than necessarily the player. Obviously, we see the player. We saw those, 35-yard bangers he would do with no backlift into the top corners and things like that. But you're right, it was something special on the left back, that was for sure. So who we got on the right then? Who's going to be on the right back then? So we've got Dixie on the left. Who's on the right for you?
So right back, I was torn between two. The two that I was torn between is Tim Breaker, Mr. Reliable, very consistent, very underrated, I think, as well. Had a good cross, a good engine, never let us down. I don't really recall him getting many injuries either, so kind of always available for the side. And then the other one I had was Sebastian Shamu. Now, he only played for us for, about 2 years from memory, but one of those years when he won Hammer of the Year, he was absolutely superb. I just remember being so excited by him at right back, and right back isn't one of those glamorous positions.
Yeah.
I think it was Jamie Carragher said to Gary Neville once, "You don't grow up saying, I want to be a right back when I'm older." But for some reason with Shemmel, he just had that kind of excitement to him, and so I was torn between the two. So when coming to making my decision, I thought, well, Tim Breaker performed consistently, I'm guessing, for about 9-10 years. Shemmel was for 2. So because of that, I've gone with Tim Breaker.
Tim Breaker. Yeah, I agree. I had Sebastian in mind because I think he was the same. Yeah, because I think, you're right. It's like that right position, right back. I mean, it's not a glamorous position. You think of who are the strong right backs. So, obviously Gary Neville and people like that. They're not the most glamorous players. But Tim Breaker's a great shout. And he scored a few goals as well. Like watching some of those seasons, he did cut into the box quite a few times. And so again, things like that I completely forgot, and I'm reliving all this stuff, and I think you've got time to do it now. Nice set of fullbacks. Okay, so who are we going to go with your centre backs?
Right, this is where it gets a little bit trickier, and at the moment I've got 6 options for two, for 2 positions. So I'm going to have to try and narrow it down whilst we're speaking. Now, if I go back to when I first started going, you've got the likes of Alvin Martin and Tony Gale and Steve Potts, people like that. And then as the years sort of go on, you get your likes of Bilic and Ferdinand and even people like Ian Pearce, David Unsworth, players like that start to come into the reckoning as well. So I think I'm going to go with Rio for one of them, because he was just such a classy player. So good on the ball. He had everything: pace, good on the ball, reasonably strong, good in the air, could finish when needed. I think I'm going to have to go with Rio. And then obviously we all know how his career took on even further after he'd left us. Typically West Ham sold him for 18 million and thought we were getting an amazing deal, and then 2 years later goes to Man United for 30. But typical of us. And the main, if you think what West Ham could have been had we kept on to him, Lampard, Joe Cole, Carrick, Johnson, and all the other players around about that time, realistically, we could have been looking at certainly challenging for the Champions League, possibly even more when you think that, the careers that all those players went on to have. And I think selling him was the start of a massive decline in our fortunes, because it then meant the others left. And so I think I'm going to go with Rio.
Yep, okie dokie. And who's going to partner Rio the next? Come on.
So tough. I really am struggling here, but I think in terms of performances and how exciting he was, and the chant that was around at the time, and then what latter happened with him, with us, I'm going to go Slaven Bilic. And I'm going to go Slaven Bilic because he made, I think from memory, he made his debut in a 1-0 win at Spurs, which, is a great way to start. I think, and, I just remember singing Super Slav so religiously at the time. I thought he was a real classy act. He was one of the first sort of foreign players that we signed that went on to be like that good. So it was like the start of that era when foreign players were coming more frequent, and I think he was the best one from memory that I can remember us buying. So I'm going to go with him, and obviously later managed us and brought us the last year at the Boleyn. So again, massive kudos for that.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, he left to join Everton, and he said he wanted to go on to win things, which was at the time I was gutted about, but I'm going to forgive him for that, and I'm going to let him come into the team. And also, yeah, thank you. And also another lovely fella. So all so far, I'm thinking the chemistry in my team.
Yeah, definitely. You got a little bit of youth as well with Rio, because we'll take Rio when he played for us. So youth. So it's nice. Yeah, nice, solid back five. There's not a lot of people shirking challenges at that back four.
No, exactly. And you got a mixture. You got your academy graduate.
Yeah.
You got two foreigners. I mean, I know. I sort of said Bilic was the first, but obviously Ludo was one of the first, but he wasn't in that era when they were all coming, so to speak. So had those two. You got Dixie and Breaker. So you got that energy and that toughness. It feels like a good like they'd get on well. It'd be a solid back line.
Yeah, definitely. Right, let's move on to midfield. Let's go for left wing. Who we got on the left, X then?
Okay, now this is where the chemistry of the team may be a little bit destroyed.
Got an idea.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I weighed up a few options. Now I thought you got Stuart Slater, who was one of my first ever favourite players. He could kind of play on the left, the right. So I was thinking of him. And then I thought I loved Matty Etherington when he played for us on the left. Lots of pace, really good goals, Hammer of the Year. Again, I'm quite close to Matty now, so a really good bloke. But then I was thinking, West Ham. You never get a Ballon d'Or nominee. So for that factor, I don't think you can look further than Dimitri. No. Now, that season at the Boleyn is what we've got to remember him for. Absolutely magical. Made that season. I think if we hadn't have had him, it wouldn't have been nowhere near as successful as it was. So I think on that reasoning, you've got to go with him.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, totally. And as you said, I don't think we've had a player make so much of an impact so early on. Literally from the first game, it was this guy's class, and I think part of that was Bilic's man management of him as well. Definitely, because I think we know he was a strange soul in terms of personality, but because I've heard people say, "Oh, yes, Bilic, it was only that, he was only successful because of Payet," but no, it was the other way around. Payet was successful because Bilic, brought him in and could work with him. And a bit similar to Harry and Di Canio. That sort of partnership. Very sweet. Okay, so we'll go with Pyatt on the left. Who's going to go on the right wing the next?
Well, firstly, when Pyatt turns up, the first thing he does is he meets Julian Dix, and they sit down and they have a conversation. Yeah. And Julian Dix says to him, "Right, I've been at West Ham for this many years. I know what this club means. You do not muck up. Oh, you've got me to answer to." So that's the first move.
I like
that. So sorry. Did you say right wing or central midfield?
We'll go right wing. Let's go right wing.
Okay, right wing. So again, lots of options. I went with, and I know he didn't always play as a right winger for West Ham. Sometimes he was a right wing back. Sometimes he was up front. I think he made his debut up front for us and scored 2 goals against Everton, possibly from memory. So that got into the England squad whilst he was with us as well. So I'm going to go with Trevor Sinclair.
Yeah, good shout.
Really good player. I remember when Harry signed him, I think loads of people warned him off because they said he had the biggest arse in football. But somehow he managed to use that arse to good effect and become a really good player for us. I mean, I think we paid $1.5 million
something
roughly.
Like that.
Dowie and Roland, wasn't it? So when you think of it like that, that's a great signing for what he turned out to be. So I think I'm going to go Sinclair.
Great shout. And as you said, there's in the team, there's some pace there, isn't it, with Trevor?
Yeah.
When he was felt and when he was on his game, he was, apart from Declan Rice, I would say, it was probably the last time, Rob Green to some extent, but last time you had like an England regular, sort of that 2002 period, and you could be proud to see on the telly a West Ham player playing for England. That was
exactly.
unusual.
And and what I also like is the him and Breaker together, because I think Breaker will overlap and get down the wing and put crosses in. He knows that if Trevor bombs forward, Breaker's going to be able to get back and support him defensively. So I think they would work well as a right side as well.
Sounds great. Right, let's go for your central mids. The next, who we got playing in the centre of the park?
Okay, now, this is tough, really tough. So I've tried to sort of think of it from a formation perspective as well. So I've tried to go with a more defensive one and then a more attacking one, rather than like 2 attackers and so on. So for defensive midfield, the 2 that have really I've been torn between are Carrick and Declan Rice and Mark Noble as well, if I throw him in there as a defensive one. So for me, Michael Carrick was just pure class, not just as a player, but as a man. And I think he was massively underrated at West Ham. Now, I know that sounds stupid because he became an England international and he went on to have the career he had. So he can't have been underrated as such. But I think he was always overshadowed by the likes of Joe Cole and Paolo Di Canio and people like that. And no one really realised that his pass completion rate must have just been phenomenal at West Ham. And we're not just talking about 2-yard passes. He used to ping them all over the place. And I just really liked Michael Carrick. Obviously, Mark Noble was offered us like such loyalty and such years of service and is a far better player than some fans give him credit. And then Declan Rice is someone that I've known since he joined West Ham as an academy product at like 14, 15 through various people I know and various work that I've done. So I've seen him grow from this average, I think it's fair to say, average kid at 14 to go on to be a regular England international via Ireland. So he's a really success story of West Ham. Again, an absolutely lovely fella, top bloke, done so much for West Ham so far. So I'm finding it really hard to choose between these 3. I'm not going to lie to you, really hard, because I've got personal and team reasons for each one.
I get it.
This is tough. I think I'm going to go with Carrick. And I'm going to go with him because I still think Declan can do even more for West Ham than he's already done. So his time is not concluded. So if we was to do this again in 3-4 years' time, I might have Declan over Carrick. But because we're not and we're doing it right now, I'm going to go with Carrick, I think,
sounds great. And who's going to partner him in that midfield the next?
So this is where I go for the attacking option, and I'm torn between 2 here, and that's Joe Cole and that's Isle Berkovic. Now I know Joe Cole again wasn't always a sort of central midfielder as such. He appeared on the wing and so on. And then Berkovic was just a pure class act, such a good player, so creative. I think I'm going to go with Joe Cole. And the reason I'm going to go with him is because him and Carey were good buddies. So again, you've got that knowing each other from the academy and that kind of natural chemistry. Also, he's an academy product. So then in the team already, we've got Rio, Carrick and Joe Cole that all came from the academy. Our name is the Academy of Football, so it's good to have that representation. And Joe, I'd like to think in a proper system with the right man management, being told that he is an attacking midfielder and that is what he's got to focus on rather than he's kind of all over the place, I think would make him even better for West Ham than he was. So yeah, I'm going to go Joe Cole.
Sounds great. And as I said, there's a nice balance. So you've got two very, very skillful players. You've got, Carrick holding it, and you've got Trevor with a bit of pace. So you sort of covered all bases there. Right, nice one. Right, X, let's talk about your strikers. Who's you going to get your goals that are going to win this team for you?
Right, so I found this the hardest position, which is you're gonna think, oh my word, he's found everything else hard. So, but I really did find this hard because there's certain players that I love because of the effort. You know, the likes of Carlton Cole and people like that, Marlon Harewood and Zamora, like the characters they were and the effort they put in. Then there was the likes of people like Trevor Morley, who I felt was underrated and a very good player, very good target man. And then you got people like Tevez, who are only technically effective for half a season. So it's really hard to choose. So the one that I'm certain on, and I'm sure will feature in anyone my age's team, is Di Canio.
Yeah.
So we'll put him in because of the entertainment value, the fact that every game he was worth going for alone. When he turned up, obviously he was worth going for. The character, the love for West Ham, that Italian flair, charisma. He just had everything, and had he been not an Italian when they were that good, and he'd been I don't know, an Englishman or another nationality, he would have been as good on the world stage as well. But I just think in Italy they had so many good players, and in his era he didn't quite do it on the international scene. But for West Ham, the memories I have of that fella are just huge, and it would be wrong to not have him in my team.
Yeah, and he still has such an affection for the club, doesn't he? As I said, a few people have picked out. He's been doing obviously the YouTube videos at the moment. He was doing Keepy Up. He's singing "I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles" in a shorts that were far too tight for him, but in a 1950s West Ham top. So not even like one of his own tops. So he's gone out and bought that or got it from someone. But and I think I think Paolo's in pretty much in everyone's team. So he's sort of a nailed on one. But that makes perfect sense.
So. You would make sense. It does, and then the thing that frustrates me more than anything is that I actually have a couple of links to Di Canio. So I know his daughter through someone. I know someone that he's worked closely with, but I've never ever. I've got his phone number. It's definitely him because it's his WhatsApp picture and it goes to his voicemail and it's definitely him. But I cannot get him to do an event or a podcast. So that in itself is frustrating. But one thing I regret in my life the most was one of my mates knew the West Ham fitness coach at the time that was actually brought in by Paolo. Now, I forget his name. I would know it if I saw it, but he was an Italian fella that Paolo brought in to do the fitness and said to Harry, I want this man to come in. Anyway, I had an indirect link to him, and he offered me a Paolo Di Canio match-worn shirt from a game when he scored against Middlesbrough. It was a good goal, and I was offered it for £50, which when I was a student, which I think I was at the time, or even before I was a student, £50 was just too much money, and I passed on that opportunity. And I look back now, and I wish so much that I'd found that £50 from somewhere, and I'd bought it, because that would have had pride and place in my house. But that's something I didn't do, and I regret that now. But anyway. We
Okay,
move on.
so now we've got the big one. Who's going to partner Paolo up front?
Right, so the options are between Tevez, Trevor Morley, and Tony Cottee. And they're all there for different factors. Tevez, those last few months at West Ham were just sensational. Such a good player, and I've started to watch the Netflix series on him. And when you see the background that he's came from to achieve what he has, you almost have that kind of that admiration for him. So that is the factor. Morley again, because I think he was underrated, and he was there for a good 4 or 5 years when I first started going. But I think I'm going to go with Tony Cottee, and I'm going to go with him because when he came back to West Ham, I must have spent about £400 on club phone calls, making sure that he was definitely joining West Ham, and I'd heard every bit of information that he was coming. And he's another one originally from the academy, a local lad, a West Ham fan. I'd heard my dad speak about how good he was. He was a record British transfer fee when he left West Ham, wasn't he? And I just think he was such a good player for us in both spells, and he got sold too early, in my opinion, because he went on to Leicester and scored lots of goals for Leicester as well. So I wish we'd kept him. And I think with Di Canio, you got him creating all the opportunities outside the box, and you got Cottee as the kind of predator, fox in the box, and with Payet, getting the ball in there, and Joe Cole breaking in, and Di Canio and Sinclair, Cottee's going to be able to feed on a lot of scraps. So I think he'd score a lot of goals.
Yeah.
And therefore, he completes my West Ham 11.
Very good. And you can just imagine how much fun there'll be with any free kicks with Paolo and Payet wrestling the ball over each other. So it's like Bradford all over again.
Well, they said Julian thrown in as well.
Exactly.
So, so it's going to be
Julian would take the penalties. Let's be honest. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No, it's a great team. We've got Ludo in goal. We've got Julian at left back. We've got Rio and Slav in the middle. We've got Breaker on the right back, and then in the midfield we've got Payet on the left, Trevor on the right. We've got Carey and Joe in the middle, and then we got PDC and Cottee up front. I think that's a really strong team. Could definitely still do. It's a challenge for Europe, I reckon that team could at the moment if they're all in their prime.
You'd hope, yeah.
You would hope so.
It depends who the manager is. If we got Rhoda, maybe not. But if we got someone else, then maybe.
Yeah, no, it's a great team. Look, thank you so much for spending the time. I know we haven't got anything else better to do, but you've got a lot. There's lots of other stuff you could do over talking to us, and I really, really appreciate it. And everyone else who's listened in and watched the episode. Anything else you'd like to mention, X? Or
no, mate. Thank you for the opportunity to come on. It's always interesting to talk to different people, and especially someone like yourself that's obviously involved with West Ham and so on. So a pleasure to come on. And if you like reminiscing, we're going to be launching a new podcast. We got obviously the West Ham Way one, but we're looking at doing one because Euro '96 is going to be shown again on ITV Hub, I think. So we're looking at doing a few podcasts, sentimental ones around England, West Ham, and just life in the 90s, because both Dave and I grew up at that time and we're kids and stuff. So that will hopefully be a good listen. But thank you for what you're doing as well. It's great for people to be able to come on and share their time. So
it's been great. It's been really good. This nostalgic period is lovely. But thanks, X. Really appreciate it.
No problem, mate.
Cheers. Take care.
Take care.